Welcome to this session of MBAFL, where I have with me two great people. In the sense that one of them is a writer who has been writing for women, especially women who are denied several opportunities and women who are not given a chance to make a living in this world in a very, a very decent way. So she has been instrumental in finding out those hapless women and writing about them and documenting their lives because she is a social sector documentarian. And I also have with me Ms. Preeti Das, who is she's actually a writer, she's an orator, she's a stand-up comedian, she's a teller of stories. You know, that's a very interesting title that we have. So she's been telling and narrating stories of women, again, women who have been gang raped, and also women who are, again, oppressed and suppressed by the society. So it is actually a pleasure to have these two extraordinary women with us. And I'd like to begin by asking this question: what made you come to this field where you feel that, you know, women's life has to be documented in a very challenging way?
So for me, when I was still in college, I started interning with a person called Peter Colasso. He was my mentor and pioneer of advertising, and in those days he was making social sector documentaries. So when I was still very young, I started traveling to the villages with him, and a lot of things I started seeing a lot of things, a lot of disparities that are not immediately present in the cities among city-bred girls, right? So it began there, and then over time, I started volunteering for various social NGOs, even while I was still working with the Times of India. And my whole life changed when I reached Orissa. To the remote pockets over there. And Orissa is one of the largest tribal belts in this country. And what I noticed there was that nobody was bothered about them, you know. Everybody was exploiting them. You could take the local, the government wasn't exactly watching out for them, or you had the mining communities exploiting them. And little girls in India, as it is, the plight of women is secondary, third rate. We are below animals. We don't know, unless we stand up for ourselves and make a noise about it, everyone is going to keep squashing you all the time, no matter where you are. And in the villages, it's even worse, with little children who are as little as 3 being sold off. I was sitting in a hotel and I was supposed to go to this remote village in Balangir district. And I went to the dining room and I overheard somebody making a deal to give away a little daughter of a laborer who's 3 years old to a person across the border in Andhra Pradesh, because Orissa and Andhra Pradesh share borders. And what is going to happen to that girl child, we all know. But at the same time, I was traveling there because I was helping a small NGO to do some documentation work so that they could further raise funds and, make their work known so that they could, also enlighten people from other. And over there, when I first walked into this village in Balangir district, in Bochagora, we were waiting at the village school. And for a little girl who was supposed to come, she was pretty much the star of the place. She was rearing ducks, teaching other children to also rear ducks, because this NGO was working with children to enable them to earn while they learned. And she did not turn up for 3 hours. And then the village elders and everybody, we walked towards the school. Nobody said anything, and we were with the NGO workers and everything. It was a tiny road, fields on either side, little few hutments. And we went to the last hutment, and then I entered and I saw a flash of pink. She was wearing a salwar kameez, almost the shade of the one that you're wearing. And she had short hair, smart girl, ready to have come and met us. And then, her face looked so sunken in, and we realized, I learned, that her mother had run away from home that day. Her father had left home long ago, brother wasn't there, and this child was alone. But then everybody started talking to her, and I suddenly hugged her. I don't know, we are 2 complete strangers, and I had this little thing in my arms. And she started loosening up, And within no time, she was gleefully talking about her ducks and the 3,000 rupees she saved in the bank. And it was amazing how this little child, a 12-year-old child, had come out of tragedy to talk about all the things she was doing for the future. And I also went on to learn that as tribal communities, when a parent leaves or someone goes missing, the entire community steps in to look after the child. So she was now under the care of the entire tribal community. So I saw her and something happened.
That was how you started
Yes,
writing about them.
writing
I
about
mean,
them.
is that the reason why you wrote a book like Hunger?
Yes, it is totally inspired by, many people have told me, although it's fiction, it sounds very documentarian. Yes, it is inspired largely by these characters, because when I came back to Bangalore and I finished that assignment, it was a little video documentary, I sat down and there was something inside me that wasn't leaving me. So I just sat and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. It was a very stream of conscious effort. I've used a lot of magic realism, and I always believe in light at the end of the tunnel, and which is how, this whole thing came about and Hunger's Daughters was born. And then soon after that, Taboo was, but I could talk about later if you want. Yeah, thanks.
Preeti ma'am, you've been you have been doing multiple things. You're a journalist, you're also a theatre artist and so on. So you have been very vocal about women's issues. So what are the advantages of being a theatre artist and a journalist and a feminist and dancer? You name it and you are that. So what is the advantage of all that, and how far has it helped to save your cause? Your cause, you have been fighting for.
So advantages, I get invited to MBILF every year. I started with doing stand-up. Now I'm curating the children's segment. So I can't even count the advantages of what women generally do, and that is doing everything and doing it very well and taking it in their stride. I am not celebrating multitasking, because multitasking is something forced on us often, but I love what I do. I just wanted to add to what Nirmala said is about documenting women's stories. It's very interesting, because as a journalist, as a crime reporter, I realized that men were reporting the crime, that this woman is raped and the story stops there. What happens to her after that? The state machinery, the police, the entire time she spends to write an FIR, if she's illiterate. So I realized, wait, who's telling our stories? It's men. All stories are also about men, right? See how the larger narrative in India has changed without wanting to touch on controversy. I have always grown up understanding that it was always Jai Siya Ram. Somehow, I'm not having a narrative, but entire gender has gone out of the slogan now. So what is happening? In 2024, even today, our stories are not being told, are not being heard. I'm a stand-up comedian. Most of them are men who are talking about masturbation and dating problems, and beyond a point, I get annoyed, right? Most of my audience is men. So when I talk about perimenopause or menopause, they're like, yeah, I'm not interested. Who's telling my problems? My damn problems are being told by this moron called Sandeep Reddy Vanga, who's making a Kabir Singh or an animal half the time, right? So I have to step in. I have to get into theatre. I have to do stand-up. I have to do journalism and have to say, listen, it's been a year of removing my entire uterus and tube, but I'm still going to talk about menopause periods, because who the hell is going to then talk about it, right? So, and how does it help me? It helps me in many ways where I reach out, but I'll also just quickly make it sharp that it's not been easy, and it is not easy because people don't want to listen to you half the time, right? And I have been through a lot of problems with threats and whatnot, but one has to do it because a lot of young women are looking up to you, and it's very important to keep it going, so that in Hindi they say chota hi sahi aag lagti rehni chahiye. Even though small, the fire should be burning in different spaces. So that's why I make sure, and it's like that, it's very simple. Okay, if you can't afford me as a stand-up comedian, take me as a storyteller. If not, take me as a dancer. If not, take me this. If not, I'll cook for you. But while I'm cooking, I'll still tell you women's stories, you know? So I make sure I poondify everywhere, wherever I can. That's why I keep changing course. I'm faster than the younger generation. I'm there on Instagram. I shamelessly put reels. I've realized that the best way to get their attention is put the... It's so sad, these reels. I hate them. But I'm like, now that I have your attention, come see my show. So if the PM can do it, so can I. So yeah.
No, I think there is so much of, you're being too bold, and that is very visible. That when I was checking for your profile, I found that your greatest secret desire is to be an item dancer in a Tamil movie. I was so shocked, and I asked
quoted,
her.
but
Yeah, and she told me it is some rubbish that somebody.
no,
has
but
written.
okay, I'm glad you brought that up because it's always that. Why is it called an item? You understand item number, or is it a word that only North or the rest of the item number everybody understands, right? Right. So it's very interesting because you say women are commodified. I agree, and I think all the shot starts from the cleavage and goes to the belly, and and I love it because I'm a Tamilian, and a lot of my Tamil movies, as I was growing up, I was very fascinated, and I'm sorry, but Nirmala, my fantasy was seeing that belly button, and in that they will break one egg and it'll hatch. Have you seen that shit? Right? You please go check these Tamil songs, right? I'm sure Malayalam songs also have that. And I was very excited. I'm like, wow, I can make an egg on my belly button. I'm so hot, like something is coming from inside, right? To crack that egg. No gas, nothing. So for me, item numbers, while people say it commodifies, I have another argument to it. That is the one time I can close my eyes and feel I own the body, I own the space. It doesn't matter. These are my breasts. I want to do this. I do it. I have nice mama, and I hate the word love handles. But whatever it is, I want to wear that backless Gujarati choli, and I want to dance the way I should be. So for me, item number is also a lot of us girls, when we close the door, we think we are Madhuri Dixit, or we think we are this, and we love doing all that, right? Why not do it in public? So for me, item number is something... You see how men dance in marriages? When we women do it, it's called vulgar. Why? No, I mean, dance is dance. It doesn't matter. Body is body.
So why did you disown that description that you have?
No, it was wrongly done. So I didn't even say that. That was the funny part. So Google always puts wrong, not disown. I didn't even say that. Someone just decided, and I was very happy that if they think I can do item number, I'm honestly living up, but it was wrongly put. Okay. Yeah. In fact, I'm owning up to it on the phone.
Nirmala ma'am, this is about your second book, that is Tab. Not second book, one of the books that I like personally, but it is extremely disturbing to read, about this young girl being trafficked into sex work and so on. And it has got a very interesting name because Marcus for Malayalis is just like a household name. So, how did you come up with that, and how did this magic realistic strain, run through your books?
There are two things about our democracy, the so-called democracy that we live in. The only democratic way of speaking is via literature or via fiction. It's the only democratic way of storytelling, right? And when I assume that mode of, wanting to communicate, at the end of the day, it's a sort of an activism that we are trying to literature and to various other things that we do. So this Taboo, just before I wrote Taboo, I was traveling to Calcutta. My friend Catherine Raja heads an NGO called Freedom Firm that rescues and rehabilitates underage girls who are kidnapped and trafficked. So these girls were learning the art of jewelry making in Calcutta. And I met one of the girls who was the manager by then of the whole workshop. She was 22 years old, and she said, I'm going to get married, and this is my invitation. And she was very happy. And then I was walking around and talking to her, and for all, we do not reveal the correct identity. So for all practical purposes, I'm just calling her Sagarika, okay? And she told me, and it was so heart-wrenching because she had been sold off by her brother and sister-in-law at the age of 8 to a brothel. And the pimp wanted her to have sex that day with a customer, one old Kooth. And this girl said no, and she was so petrified. And one of the senior sex workers, who was about 45 or 50 at that time, said, I will protect you. The pimp overheard this and stabbed the woman to death in front of this child. And from that day, for the next 5 or 6 years, this child had been having at least 12 customers by noon and God knows how many more thereafter. But she always had it in her to want to, escape. And so she did leave, she worked with some of her friends and they were in one rural town somewhere near Durgapur or somewhere in Calcutta, one of those industrial towns. And they trace, the way they kind of do this rescue work is they get the cops when they get a hint. They get citizens, normal citizens, to just come and stand there to see that the right things being happening, social workers, and then they rescue the girls and bring them back. And then the rehabilitation process is so difficult because these children are so sexually active by the time they're 15, 16, their sexual urges are so strong, they have to put them through horse therapy, and then, and various other activities, and many of them are HIV positive by the time they're 17 or 18. So it was very heart-wrenching. But this Sagarika, who had gone on to take, and it's also very easy for them to go back into the sex trade because they put them in work that pays them, say, 5,000 or 10,000 rupees a month, and they could be making 10 times that in one day, if they don't have a midman kind of intercepting, a pimp taking away all that money also. So, and that's how it's Taboo was born. I came back, and this story was born as a result of that. And I'm also a great fan of Marquis. And there was this book called Erendira, and my protagonist in this book is called Erendira. So the thing is, although the book is placed, maybe it's a story. I mean, it's not exactly the story of the Bengali girl. It's just a trigger. But then I've transposed it into so many lives that are around the world. For me, it's a global problem at the end of the day. And so Erendira also has some Spanish ancestry, and it is very travelesque. All my work is very travelesque because I think life is a huge journey, and then we keep moving. And so many languages, many characters, many people keep walking in and out of the framework. Yeah.
This is something that I like to ask both of you because we have been reading about the memoirs of photographers who are working in the war front. You have journalists working with gang rape victims and so on. Now, most of them has got this bleak expression. They are fed up with life because they have been seeing the sad reality of humanity. So, but looking at both of you, you have been writing about child prostitution, teenage sex work, then also about so many horrible things that we confront every day. But you maintain this cheerful persona. How is that possible?
I don't know how to answer that. I have lived over months with gang rape survivors. I have seen a 10-year-old, and I followed her story, who was gang raped repeatedly for 6 months by 8 men, and she got pregnant, and how the state insists that she has the baby because it's crossed the pregnancy period, etc. It's not that it doesn't hit you. I lost my cool because I could not deal with seeing a 10-year-old, my son is 10 now, it's a child, and no reaction from the state officials, It does affect. Cheerful doesn't mean you are being frivolous. Cheerful means maybe you're finding other ways to talk about it. So when I do my stand-up, I do a lot about the entire process of writing an FIR if you're raped. It's a lot of dark humor, but this comes from years and years of observing, of being with gang rape survivors and their stories. Unfortunately, I have to try doing it in front of an audience as evolved as yours. So what hurts me is not only dealing with the 10-year-old, but what hurts me is an audience like this that doesn't understand. But after me, a male comes and says sexist jokes, and they're applauding hard for that. That hurts me more. So for me, I think it's not about staying cheerful. As I said, I'm passionate, and I make sure I continue doing it in some way or the other. I'm trying to compile these stories and come up with a hero who's a gang rape survivor. So I want to tell her story. And I want to tell these stories to my 2 to 6 year old. Now, how do you even explain rape to somebody that young? But I think you should, because it starts very early, touch and all that. So it's not that it's always cheerful, but it doesn't mean that one is grim about it either. It hurts. It hurts a lot, and especially there's empathy. But what do you do with that then?
How do you manage with the kind of things that you take with you? For instance, reading about them, being with them, because you are a working journalist. So you have first-hand experience of talking to these people.
No, and that's where theatre comes to my rescue. I'll be honest, I think everybody should do theatre. It has nothing to do with acting or anything. We have a clowning expert here. It's body trauma. It releases all the trauma. When you just scream, you shout, you dance, or you do mirroring exercises, it's trauma release. So for me, it's only theatre. And now that I am out of Gujarat, I can say it's a lot of alcohol. Gujarat is a dry state, so I'll get arrested, or I'll have people coming home the next day saying, "Where's your alcohol? Please share it with me." So good alcohol, and I think a lot of theatre. Honestly, I have no other gyan that I get up at 5 and I do pranayam, because I never get up at 5. So sorry, yoga expert is here. I shouldn't be saying that. You don't get up at 5. Yeah, I realized with her that you can do yoga any time of the day, because I thought, damn it, you have to get up at 5 to do that thing. I'm not doing it. So I think it's just theatre and old monk. Yeah.
So how do you maintain this calm in the storm? Not this calm.
So basically, I've been a total firebrand. Everybody is scared. I mean, usually the men, because they come, we talk about a rape case, and they say, "Oh, the woman was badly dressed." I say, "Shut up." So you are standing here with no clothes on, and you expect you will shut up if women pounce. Of course you will, because that's what you want, but that's besides the point. But it doesn't give you any excuse to say, "I went and raped that woman because I saw her belly button or I saw her back." The statistics show that more than 90% of the women that are raped in this country have been wearing either burqas or saris or, completely clothed.
No, 6-7 month babies.
Yes.
Nappies have aroused you? I'm just saying,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And little newborn babies, 3-year-old kids, what the bloody hell is wrong with you, So there's this fire to just go and sock this masculine energy in the face, which is destructive masculine energy, which also makes me very optimistic. And I feel blessed, because I have been a very optimistic person, completely engaged in so many different activities, and that enables me to empathize and also showcase what is happening to the world, be it as a journalist or a writer or whatever. It could be a normal, I'm riding on the street, I go home, and there is a fight happening outside a liquor shop in Bangalore, and I can see a woman, 5 men surrounding a woman. Now my bike has a press sticker. So at that hour of the night, I know what to do and what not to do. I just stop my bike at a distance, say the scene of action is. They observe me and they see that press sticker and they stop. So it's important for each of us in this country, even if we are this emancipated by this degree, to just stand up for others in whatever way we can. And that is important. We cannot just say, "Oh, something's happening," and just talk about it. We are as bad as the person who's perpetrating the crime, right? So that is where each of us has a capability and has to step in. I use literature or conversations or whatever to kind of, emulate the correct reactions. I take the time to kind of squash all these, terrible male energies around me, to kind of help them to see light also. And people have come around. So, and that's nice, because in India, men are born and brought up to believe they are gods. It is not anybody's fault, and the women are serving them. You're willing to go around cooking, cleaning, going to work. Everybody wants a fair, good-looking, working, homely bride. And we are catering to that nonsense without standing up for it, right? So that's what this whole conversation is about. Yeah.
Actually, I'm reminded of last year's your conversation in the same venue where you were talking that you're happily single, and also talking about the relationship issues of urban society. So how do you look at that? Because it's 1 year has also passed. So how do you redefine your relationship status?
I think she's also asking you if you're still single. It's been a year. Did you move on or no? She said,
So I'm happily single, but I also date. You know what I'm saying. So you can be. So I think everybody can be single and maintain that singlehood while still being in a relationship, because I'll tell you, this all boils down to one thing that my mother always used to say. You come alone, you go alone. Okay? There's nobody with you. I don't know, unless there are twin babies. And when that happens, you need to learn to live your life and live it to the fullest as a singular entity, be it a man or a woman or anybody. And when you are able to respect yourself, when you start to learn many things, you start to, like I started learning yoga 2 years ago, and then I did a teacher's training, I'm learning belly dance, I do whatever, constantly doing something or the other. And that keeps me and all my cells active and energized and, constantly feeling optimistic, looking forward. And I believe every human being should do that. The way you eat food, you must read the right books, or you must nurture your body with, with certain activities, foods, whatever. It's all a whole thing, that platter that comes together. And if we don't watch out for ourselves, we don't respect ourselves, nobody else is going to respect you. And it happens across societies, across borders. Everybody, I am happy only because somebody is with me. Oh, but I learned so much from those tribal kids. Look at that Sushanti. Her mother had run off, right? And the same day she was standing up and teaching another kid how to rear those ducks. She was telling us her story. She wanted me to take it to the world. And that child was a better teacher to me than any teacher I've met in the classroom, right? So that's what we need to learn to do as women especially, and men too, because if men find their own occupations, trust me, they will also let us be. Your mind grows and you know what you're doing.
Preeti ma'am, you have been encountered with a lot of women's issues and even rape and even bleaker things. So can you narrate one thing that has left a deeper impact on your soul, something that has disturbed you for a long time, something from which you are still not able to get out? One incident.
Okay. I mean, sorry, most of you realize that at least I don't understand the difference between parliamentary and unparliamentary language, so I'm going to use a word, forgive me, but this is what happened. Award-winning journalist, whatever, standing at what we call private gigs. You understand private gigs? We stand-up comedians are called for private gigs as well. Most private gigs are on the outskirts of the city. So I'm like, yeah, this bold stand-up comedian who's called for a marriage. So I had to do stand-up comedy before, as part of the marriage party. So I'm standing there and thinking in my head, okay, this is the kind of content that I'm supposed to do. And I started, right? And I just said, this is about just the year before COVID happened, right? When things were, nowadays people don't pay for stand-up comedy because life has changed after COVID for arts and performance spaces. But I'm standing there and I'm doing my usual introduction and I'm telling, hey, my name is this, and I speak 6 languages. One guy, and this is a marriage, that's why I'm stressing on the fact that in India, marriage is the sacrosanct place. They had a problem with my content and they were like, hey, keep your content quote unquote clean, etc. And I'm like, okay, listen, there's a lot of money. I don't mind doing clean content for like so much money, yeah? Simple, I was just saying my name is Preeti Das and I speak 6 languages, and this 60-year-old something man gets up. Yeah, and you know how they are, right? In the marriages, there's this alpha male. He rubs his stomach, looks at me. I'm going to say this in Hindi and I'll translate for those who don't get it. Because I was doing my content in Hindi, I said, मैं 6 भाषाएं बोलती हूँ. He looked at me and said, आप किस भाषा में चोदती हैं? Which means, in which language do you fuck? So, award-winning journalist, daring, stand, nothing bullshit. My first reaction was, can I see my cab guy somewhere in the nearest proximity? Because I was starting to look for the guy who got me to the outskirts. That has stayed back. That feeling of helplessness has still stayed back. What do? I don't know. I still go for a lot of shows. Just that I keep my location on now. I mean, even if they cut me and throw me, it'll take people time to figure out where I am there. But, and this is recent. So, yeah, it has stayed back because they think that if there's a woman stand-up comedian being called, hey, I can get loose with her because there must be something, right? And here she is, she's talking about her body, she's talking about things. So can I use that in that particular way? That's one incident that I can never forget, because after that, I did realize that everything apart. My editor had told this to me when I was a young, daring journalist saying, I'm going to go here. I was a crime reporter, so I used to sit with a lot of these dons and interview them. So he told that, always remember where your exits are, and a good story is a story told. Don't die in there. So since then, there's been a fear also of sort of performing in many spaces.
Since our session is actually titled Fiction, Feminism and Fantasy, have you ever felt like, mixing these three and writing a purely fictional work based on your experiences as a journalist?
Yes, in fact, I'm not officially allowed to say it, but my work is getting shot for an OTT platform, all these stories. It's an anthology of crime that they're putting together and, of course, going to be fictionalizing it. Yeah, I mean, I did write it. I did rewrite it because they wanted exaggerated, right? And which is a sad part, right? I mean, violence exaggerated is better violence according to producers. And I'm like, how is that even possible? A rape is a rape, damn it. How are you going to exaggerate that rape and therefore get more TRP ratings or more people watching, So yes, it's there. It's there. I can't. Yeah, talk about it.
When we were about to begin the session, I asked her whether she can perform a stand-up comedy for the audience, and she said, no, will you ask Mammootty to perform? Will you ask a dancer to perform?
Yeah, what's wrong?
But now I'm so happy that she's actually performing while she's giving an answer. And I don't think that anybody is finding it, boring like the way you said it. It's a very wonderful way because you're very
This is not
expressive.
performance, this is reality. By the way, please, this really happened. And I still think egg breaking on the belly button is a nice way of eating bullseye, right?
Ma'am, before we began our session, we had a promise we'll be asking you to read certain parts from your book.
So just a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll read from Hunger's Daughters first. This is happening in the forests of Jharkhand, okay? And there's one character name is Asha Paharia. And she's just joined the Naxal movement because of what is happening there because of the poverty. And she's been asked to kind of join her brother who was with the Naxal movement, has kind of died in combat, and she's there, okay? Asha Paharia is not concerned about how God will judge her. She is ready to meet the khaki-wearing strangers who have promised friendship. The khaki attire is a few shades darker than that of Inspector General Bawa. Shades, shadows, khaki, people, with lands, now without, melt into the Dalma ranges by night. Tonight, Asha is leaving home to earn her family dal and bath. She melts into the thickness of the Dalma ranges with the khaki-clad strangers who beckon her into their hidden world. Yeah? Continue? Okay. En route to Sambalpur, Sushanti Bodra closes her eyes and travels to a distant day in the future. She is distanced from her home by khaki-clad strangers. She is a prisoner. Sushanti will now allow distance to dictate the future. She will define her own future. The future is not quite here. Opening her eyes back in the present, Sushanti realizes she has not seen her father's dead body. Nor have the elders of Bochagora, nor have the Panchayat Mukhyas, definitely not the knowledgeable members of the Bal Panchayat. Members of the minority communities, strange and not so strange. Village panchayats, Bal panchayats, herds of elephants, shoals of fish, schools of sheep, flurry of birds, dancing mayuros, dead mayuros. All whisper a secret from the jungle beyond the highway into which Sushanti migrates from her window seat in the closed jeep. Suddenly, Sushanti is in the future. The future brings her eye to eye with human flesh and emotions that have been dead to her for nearly 3 years.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This is something that I wanted to ask you. See, you have been writing about girls who have been trafficked, child exploitation and so on. Do you keep a track on them after you write about them? Or you've been associated with some NGOs.
Yeah.
So will they help you to be in touch with them? Or you have made
So
them...
actually, I had met Sushanti Bodra when she was around 12 and I met her again when she was 18. So I went back to the same village to help document another project. Sometimes you lose touch because they are also... So in India, just so happens that a large percentage of the population is alive and kicking today thanks to the work that some very small NGO workers do. And I'm not talking about large-scale NGOs. These are remote NGOs in the remote, far-flung areas and people who have sacrificed their whole lives to stay there, and they're working quietly, not making a noise, because you make a noise, you know who will come for you, clad in orange or purple or pink or whatever colors they want to wear and show their faces, right? And the mining community will stop you because people want to make money out of them, and then you have all kinds. So these people work so quietly and they enable the lives, and you see the result is children like Sushanti who are now, even if their communities kind of say get them married or whatever, they are teachers, they are influencing other children, they go out, they join other NGOs, so it's very beautiful. And our little Sushanti had grown up to be quite a pretty young girl, and her mother had come back. That was the beauty of it. She had run off with another tribal person because her father had gone missing. But her mother was back, and Sushanti and her mother were together.
Do they know that they have been immortalized in this work?
Well, I don't think so, and I don't think they care because they're such distant worlds. And I also think it's sometimes important not to corrupt that, not to bring her in the forefront, because Sushanti is just a mirror to you and me. And to everybody else. The moment I put her here, people will murder her. They will murder her spirit. It's better to stay anonymous, like the NGO workers who do their work. Yeah.
This actually brings me to another NGO that you are part of, that is Mahila Manch.
It's not an NGO. Okay. It's a crazy collective. I don't want to say NGO because every NGO is losing the FCRA in the country now, one after the other. So, no, it's a crazy collective of women. Sorry, you're asking.
Yeah, no. So, what do you exactly do, this crazy collective of yours? And what is your role in saving all these women?
We are using stand-up comedy and humor across villages of Gujarat to help women talk about issues like domestic violence, menstrual hygiene, because nothing like humor. And humor, as I say, is a rubber sword. It makes a point and it does not draw blood. And people are laughing, and half of the time they're laughing at themselves. So it's great to put a point forward. And we all take pride in saying stand-up comedy is new. It's never been new to India. Look at Tenali Rama, look at Vikram Betal, look at Birbal Akbar. Humor has always been a part of sarcasm, satire, change. It's not a part of change anymore, but
so how do these oppressed
yeah.
women respond to your humor?
Oh, they're not oppressed women. Let me just get that clear. They are pretty empowered. They just need a space to talk. They respond beautifully. In fact, a lot of humor comes from them. We just train them when to pause and what and how to tell their stories. Domestic violence. This was a conversation between two women in a lovely place called Mehsana in Gujarat. They were just talking, and a newly married said that, my husband hits me. So this elderly woman said very sweetly, and I was overhearing the conversation. So this elderly woman said, it's okay if he hits you at times because it's his way of showing love. So this young new bride just looks at this old woman and says, okay, even I want to show my love like this. Can I occasionally give him 2-3 under the, wherever? I'm like, listen, this is a great space to start a set. Because if violence is love, then it's justified by both, right? So all I'm saying is humor is with the people, everybody. And when I say humor, doesn't mean you laugh. After 14 years of stand-up comedy, I've realized more powerful humor is when people are silent. I don't need you to laugh. I don't need you to clap. If you're silent, I think that hits harder. So that's what we do. We ask them what they want to talk about. And we try to break this entire shackle of women only wanting to bitch about their mother-in-laws. Right? Well, they do want to do that, which is great. But then the mother-in-laws are sitting and... So these are not oppressed women. And I think we should not use the word loosely oppressed because it's wrong. It's like, oh my God, the woman is oppressed. Let me do something about her. No, let me figure out whether she thinks that's oppression or not, or maybe she's not oppressed. She's empowered in a way that I don't know. And I'm going to quickly end with saying, I think in these 14 years of so many private gigs, of performing for the rich, performing for the educated, the most memorable show ever has been when I went to a small town called Vapi. I was telling Nirmala about it. It has chemicals. The women who work there are not educated. They come from various parts of the country, Jharkhand and Bihar being one of it. So here this urban woman is standing in front of them, and I was told, hey, do stand-up comedy. And I'm like, what stand-up can I do with these women who I thought were oppressed? And I'm like, do I just start with, oh my God, I feel for what you're going through. I'm like, I can't do that. But I then started with just talking to them. And these women whose husbands are involved in various crimes, who are in small jails, were telling me how they're having nice fun with other men. And I'm like, these are sexually empowered women. Maybe I just need to talk safety, but hey. And me, nicely educated, not getting, because I'm married, I'm like, oh God, that's it. That's the end of my life, right? So all I'm saying is that show I take back because 200 women, all in those nylon saris with old blouses, sitting, not knowing what the hell is Women's Day. Some smart HR must have thought, okay, let us do Women's Day celebration for these women who don't know the history of Women's Day, but so empowered in their own ways. And I think that was one show which was 45 minutes, but 2.5 hours, and I took back so many stories of each one of them, So Mahila Manch is something that I found, and we are looking at, again, I start from the beginning, who is telling our stories? Nobody is. In storytelling, in Hindi, we start Ek Tha Raja. What is the Rani doing? She's just pushing the narrative of the Raja, either as his mother, his sister, his wife, his maid. Where am I getting the Bechtel test? Where am I getting women characters being equally strong? Where am I celebrating my mother, my grandmother? Right? That's what Mahila Manch is trying to do. We're collecting stories and telling these women, tell your story, I want to listen to it, and let me see what I can do with it.
Now, looking at the way you speak and also considering the fact that you are in Gujarat, I always wonder whether you had any legal issues with the government.
Yeah.
And how did you deal with them?
That's when you get women lawyers, because they're there with you. There's no other way of dealing with it. There's no other way. You have to have good friends.
So we are reaching the fag end of the session, and I'm throwing the session for questions. If you have any questions to either of the writer, activist, duo, you can actually ask them.
Yeah, hi ma'am. I would like to get an opinion from both of you. The thing is that, do you ever felt that hearing to these rape cases every now and then, it's getting so normalized these days? Because some years before, when we hear a girl getting raped or a woman getting raped, people felt so frustrated, like they are from their own family, they are their daughters. But currently, people don't react like that. Yes, yesterday there was a woman getting raped. Day before yesterday there was a teenager getting raped. Tomorrow also a girl will get raped. So do you think that this fact of getting raped is so normalized now that people are not just getting any empathy on them?
Yeah, it's actually quite true because rape in India happens even within the households, right? There are people like brothers-in-law raping sisters-in-law, or father-in-law raping daughter-in-law. It happens on a daily basis and nobody talks about it. Father raping daughter. And because it's a societal taboo, the mothers themselves will often tell you, please don't talk about it. You must have done something wrong. Right? So in India, the problem is this, precisely this. Because it is so normal and in your face, you don't want to face it. You don't want to stand up and do something about it. And I know so many cowards who don't want to do it. And that begins at home. The legal part of it, where you go to the cops, where they tell you, oh, keep quiet, that guy's an MLA's son, this guy's, what happens in that Hathras case in Uttar Pradesh? So hushed up, we don't know. We still don't know who the murderer is. So many people have parked themselves there, nothing's come of it. You know, and then they keep playing it and using it as some titillating item number on page 1 and all, or all on the news channels for just people to sit and gawk at, because that's the kind of society we've become. We don't want to stand up for ourselves, we don't want to stand up for anybody.
What's your name? Namita. Yeah, wow, I have sharp ears. Namita, is a personal opinion, da. I do feel very uncomfortable when you use the word rape and normalize at the same time, because that entire act, I mean, having covered it for years and years, and I have done only rape cases of the little ones, not even elder women, right? In fact, again, it's a personal view. I really think we should constantly be writing about it and talking about it. But it's very important that a lot of women do this. They write about it, give their opinion. You know, if you don't, then it just ends up being another small little Instagram reel, right? Did you say we've normalized Fair and Lovely now? Still there, we were still talking about dark skin. We're still talking about the discrimination we have, right? So I think for me, I mean, I don't have a definite answer, but I do find it a little problematic when we say, and it's not you and you're right when you ask this question, you know, that is rape normalized? I mean, one has to keep writing about it, talking about it, and therefore bringing it in various forums when you're least expecting it, right? And I'm sorry if that's going to make you a more aware society, which is a joke in itself, then maybe keep doing it. Talk about it. Clearly that's not happening, and statistics will prove you time and again that it's not happening. So I'm of the very strong opinion that it has to be discussed. And just adding on to Nirmala, as a reporter, I remember the horrors, because if there was a rape, like, I don't know, Trivandrum areas, but certain areas are cool areas, right, in a city. We say all the rich people live there, right? So in Ahmedabad, there was one direct instruction: if it's a rape in Prahlad Nagar, it's front page. If it's a rape in Vastral, we'll put it on the 4th or 5th page. Right? I had a problem, I fought, but I said, hell, let's still carry that story. Right? I mean, so I honestly feel it has to be talked about. It has to be written about, maybe different facets of it. And that's when we're working on making these heroes, these stories around, and I use hero for both male and female. So, you know, it's very important that we talk about them, and we talk about what happens to the survivors. It's a woman lost. The society is not working to bring the woman back. That's it, right? Justice done. But what happens after that is something we don't talk about. Maybe, yeah, so facets of it have to be kept on talking about. That's my feeling.
Yeah, and even within the home, there are wives being raped by their husbands every day.
Marital rape.
Marital rape is the highest. And in a country like India, from what I know, and so many people complain about it and do nothing about it. So you have to stand up. You have to start respecting yourselves. It begins there.
Do you guys think that women have a part in perpetrating abuse, violence towards other women?
Yes.
Silence is abuse. When you're seeing something happening and you don't want to do anything, turn your back and run and say, oh, that happened, and go sit in your room and cry, that's abuse.
Also, patriarchy is not just men. Please, I mean, I teach gender, so patriarchy is also, it's conditioning. It's conditioning, yeah. And then there's the spectrum of abuse, which is, I see abuse as genderless often, as in, yeah, because, well, unfortunately, it's more of male abuse, but yeah, women, it's a big, another topic for discussion.
Ma'am, could I go on now? I have two quick questions. One, I was really curious to know what happened in that marriage party after that comment was made. And secondly, this is not to pry into your personal matters, but ma'am, you are single and you're married. So, as somebody who's been, in a way, studying feminism or has been passionate about it, I would like to know how you pick a man you can marry. And because in our male circles, it's very tough to deal with the sexism and, the kind of mentality they have. So how do you deal with the, males in your circle and the way they talk about things? And then how do you pick a person? Like, how do you go around and find a man that you can actually be with? Again, this is not to get into your personal life. So,
So glad we are.
That event, I'll quickly tell you. Nothing, I stopped midway and I went and then I fought and I said, I need the full payment, though I didn't do the show. But that's all I could do. I'm telling you, that was a moment when I realized that women vulnerability is honestly a little different. Even today, it's a secret, but when I'm in a hotel, even if I'm in a good hotel, I'll take one chair and I'll put it near the door in the night, yeah? And then I saw one Instagram reel in which they put a coffee mug on the handle because if somebody comes, that mug will fall. So I realized that despite all your accolades and everything, in that moment when you're alone with anybody, I don't know why. Otherwise, I speak like fire. I can give back replies, but I could not. I don't know what held me back. The same happens for when we talk to women and saying, hey, he touched your butt. Why could you not do anything? There's a play that I'm working with very young girls. It's a writing by a 24-year-old girl. I'm producing it. There are these lovely moments in which they show how women tend to freeze. Otherwise, when we sit and talk, we'll be like, if he touches me, you see, I'll get that pepper spray. Twice my pepper spray went in my eye only, really. Right? So all that apart, I don't know what happened to me, I'll be very honest. So I just said, okay, bye. And I went and I tried fighting, but I realized that my safety was more important. And then I had to ask somebody in the police to say I'm threatened all. So that's the end of the story. Huh? They gave the payment 2 months later, but they gave. You're from Gujarat? You're so asking about payment. We are like money-minded people. Then I got my payment. Yeah. Full. Yeah, the police had to do, hey, I know you did this, like that. In fact, one of them was a mimicry artist. He was not even the police.
Okay, so how do you pick a man, to quickly answer that question?
How do you answer that question?
No, I will tell you. A simple rule. And I mean, it can have many dimensions. We can have a discussion outside. The thing is, never fall into any relationship from a point of compromise, either from peer pressure, parental pressure, whatever. First of all, that makes us pick the wrong person. We just go for whatever is there. All right? Second, keep building yourself up all the bloody time. Keep working on yourself and live your life to the fullest. You will automatically attract the right person. Third, I've stopped dating Indian men.
That's why she comes to Mathrubhumi to see if there are others as well. No, but can I give you don't bother asking about this men question and all that. Yeah? They, in Hindi cinema and all, and I'm sure even in Malayalam film, I'm a huge fan of Fahad Fasil. I can never do any jokes on him. If I had time, I would love to tattoo his name. I think that guy is gorgeous. But with men, I'll tell you, listen, one mantra for life, yeah? They say, no, the one will wait. But to get that one, please try and test many, yeah? Please. That's how you will know that which is the least sexist, which is the, yeah? Otherwise, don't fall for this one-man trap, please. Sorry, I'm just saying, I'll be honest, don't. Right? So don't even ask male questions like this, da. Are you
Thank you to our speakers.